Hey, everybody. In this podcast, I want to talk about what is one of the most interesting and probably the most surprising aspects of Spanish Texas. And remember, the Spanish controlled Texas until 1821. The Spanish are kicked out of North America in 1821. There's a revolution in Mexico. And of course, Texas is part of colonial Mexico. And the Spanish are kicked out, and then in 1821, Mexico takes over this territory, which it controls from 1821 until 1836. Now, I know y'all hate dates. That's one of the classic criticisms of history among students, that it's all just boring dates. I try to teach history kind of more narratively as a story, but the fact is you have to know some dates. You just have to. It's really not that hard. Some of the dates I talked about on Monday were 1763, when Spain controls Louisiana for a period of 40 years, and Texas loses its status as a buffer. And then the Spanish try to retrench, and then very significantly in 1803, when the United States buys the Louisiana Territory and becomes the neighbor to Texas. The U.S. is really Spain's and later Mexico's worst nightmare, because Americans had their eye on Texas for a long, long time, which is really what Tourget's book is about. Just to give you a little hint, especially Southerners who are growing cotton almost exclusively with slave labor, they really want to grab East Texas because they know it's prime cotton growing territory. But I don't want to get too far ahead of the story. Let's go back to the Spanish period. Okay, here's the surprising story. I'll start with an anecdote. There was a woman, a rancher. Her name was Maria del Carmen Cavillo, and she inherited, which is very interesting, the fact that she inherited. So think about that first, or don't think about it, but put that in the back of your mind. I'm gonna go back and talk about the significance of that. She inherited Rancho de las Cabras, about 30 miles south of San Antonio, after her father, Ignacio Caballo, was murdered in an Indian raid in 1814. By the way, I'm not going to test you on these particular names. I know that's just getting too picky. So what you need to know is around 1814, a daughter of a man who was murdered, who was a rancher, inherited the property. And this ranch supplied livestock and crops to Mission San Francisco de la Espada, which is the mission that is the furthest south. There's 5 missions, beginning with the Alamo, heading south along the San Antonio River, and Espada mission is the furthest south. It's really cool. It's very remote. It's a beautiful, beautiful mission. So anyway, so this is how her ranch is making business, or this is the prime customer. Espada kind of hung on after some of the other missions were going out of business. So what happened is that this woman, Cabillo, she was a very successful rancher. She knew how to use a gun. She was a good business administrator, and she ran this ranch for decades. She grew the ranch. We think she owned about 2,000 head of cattle. She made her own peace treaty with Indians by doing what the Spanish did best, by kind of bribing them. So she would give them beef, and she would allow them to camp on her land. So in her own way, she made a separate peace with the nomadic Indians that she had to deal with. And she ran the ranch until her death in 1856, and she died when she was 91, and she left the ranch to an adopted daughter and son. Okay, so kind of interesting. She seems like a remarkable woman, Maria del Carmen Cabillo. What's the bigger story here? Here's the bigger story. In British North America, Boston, Philadelphia, Charleston, New York, a female would not have been allowed to inherit such property. There were very, very strict property laws that were, for women, were really devastating in British North America, especially after a female got married. When a female was married, after she was married in British North America, she became legally non-existent. She just disappears into the husband's legal status. And women in British North America had almost no rights under the law of North America. At the same time, in Spanish Texas, women had significant property rights. So this is really the nub of this whole podcast. The rights and the status that women had in Spanish Texas were far more significant than the rights and status of women in other parts of North America. Someone just came to my door. I have to answer it, and then I'm going to talk about this in another podcast.